More receiver news right at the buzzer. The Colts knew if Alec Pierce got to test open free agency, that might have been it for Alec Pierce with the Colts. They get a 4-year, $116 million deal done. The trickle effect of this is to clear out some money. They send Michael Pittman to the Steelers for a late round pick swap. Michael Pittman signs a 3-year, $59 million extension with the Steelers. So double Colts moves here. Matthew, obviously, Alec Pierce, from a fantasy angle, I find interesting to digest because I think at times before any of this started, we were like, God, imagine Alec Pierce on the Patriots or the Bills. And you start naming all these different places. Good for Alec Pierce, friend of the show, gets a giant payday from the Colts. But how do we project him now? Pittman's out, some more targets, but still some questions at quarterback, even with Daniel Jones on the transition tag.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people saw that price tag and were like, wait, did Jay Croucher negotiate this? And the answer is yes.
Nice job, Jay.
Yeah, it's well done. Yeah, for the shoe.
Yeah, Alex, my boy. He was lovely as well on our show. Very nice man, Alec Pierce. Very happy he's going to get paid. I think he's going to spend that money very responsibly. I don't know if
spend it at all.
Alec Pierce seems like a very high character type of operator. But look, I think we talked about Alec Pierce ad nauseum to the point where he's become a bit on the show. But look, I think the thing with Pierce is that, look, he went over 1,000 yards receiving this year, despite missing time, despite the fact that he only had one reception all season, over 50 yards. So he wasn't just fluking it with bombs. And to me, the most encouraging thing is that he runs a diversified route tree now. And the fact that, he had games where he earned 13 targets against the Steelers, 10 targets against the Chargers, the fact that he was able to do more over the middle, the fact also that he was able to have a massive game with Riley Leonard as his quarterback. The last time we saw Alec Pierce, he was going 4 for 132 and 2 touchdowns with Riley Leonard in a game that he got ejected from, which he shouldn't have been ejected from, as we've covered as well. But I think that Pierce, as well, with Pittman gone, the Colts are very much a forgotten team in the AFC landscape, but I am old enough to remember the first 2 months of the season where they had the best offense in football. And I think that the bones of that offense are still mostly there. We'll see what Daniel Jones looks like off the Achilles, presuming that he is the starter as everyone expects him to be. But this is still a really good offensive line. It's still Pierce with Tyler Warren and Josh Downs alongside of him. Pittman is gone. I think that more affects Josh Downs than it'll affect Alec Pierce. So I think operates in a little bit of a different sphere. Still Jonathan Taylor at running back. And I think that Pierce, he's young enough at 25 where he can take another step. And Connor, like this guy, it feels like Alec Pierce is like a seventh rounder who came out of nowhere. Alec Pierce was drafted in the second round. This guy's got a lot of talent. I think that he really showed it last year.
Yeah, size, sub 4.4 wheels, like it's all there for Alec Pierce. And obviously he's been on the right trajectory where he's gotten so much better year after year. And part of that, it's been health. I think he's had 3 concussions throughout, maybe I'm not sure through the pros. I know he had 2 in a 9-month stretch. So injuries have played a part in sometimes derailing that. But when he's healthy, he could stretch the field. And Matthew, I think the big thing is with Michael Pittman gone, Pierce kind of finally evolves from that role of, okay, vertical guy. Can we get you running some shallow crossers where you have the ball in your hands after the catch, or some slants or some digs? Basically just open up the route tree where you operate more like a higher volume number 1-ish rather than this vertical stretch number 3, number 2 receiver. They're paying him to be a lot more than that now.
They are, but fantasy-wise, I don't know that he's going to be much more than that. Look, everything you say makes total sense, right? Listen, we like Alec Pierce. We like him on the show. He has become a complete wide receiver. I understand, for all the jokes about, wow, I can't believe Alec Pierce got that kind of money and did Jay Croucher negotiate the deal? The truth is the reporting out there is that Alec Pierce actually turned down more money to return to the Colts. I know my Commanders really wanted him. I know there were a lot of teams very interested in his services, and ultimately he got offered supposedly more money than what he ended up, but he gave a hometown discount to come back to Indianapolis, which is great. But here's the thing. So last year he has a breakout year, right? He's awesome. We love it. And so I'm going to take weeks 1 through 17. I think the week 18 game, I know he had a huge game here, but I think weeks 1 through 17 is probably a more accurate reflection. He has a breakout season last year. He was awesome. To your point, Jay, the Colts offense was unstoppable the first two months of the year. Alec Pierce was wide receiver 36 on a points per game basis. Now, okay, you take Michael Pittman and move him to Pittsburgh, so there's some more targets to go around. Okay, fine. But this is still a guy who, despite some of the games you mentioned, Jay, still a guy who averaged under 6 targets a game, still only had an 18% target share. He's led the NFL in yards per reception each of the last 2 years. So he is a deep ball threat. I agree with you that his game has become much more than that. And certainly this contract says they expect him to be a number 1 wide receiver. But I think as we sit here, if we're here a year from now talking about the Colts, do we think he gets more targets than Tyler Warren? I don't. Do we think he gets more targets than Josh Downs? I think there's a chance that Downs gets more targets as well, just when you think about how Daniel Jones throws the ball. Now, what Pierce does is he opens up this entire offense. They still want to be run heavy with Jonathan Taylor. So, I mean, look, he was wide receiver 36 on a points per game basis last year. I think that's about right. Like, maybe move him up a little bit. Again, extra targets with no Pittman there. But to your point, Connor probably helps Josh Downs more than it helps Alec Pierce. So I think he's like, in the 30 to 35 range, as a wide receiver. But I think this is a better move for the Colts NFL wise than it is suddenly, Alec Pierce is suddenly a top 20 wide receiver and an automatic starter. I think he's going to have some huge spike weeks next year. Love him in best ball, as we like to say. But I think consistent fantasy production, given how the Colts offense runs, I think it's going to be tough to see Pierce. Look, Pierce has that skill set, and maybe he does become the alpha, but it just feels like in Shane Steichen's offense, they like to spread it around, and that I think the person that leads the team in targets next year is Tyler Warren.
Yeah, I think on the Colts, I think I'm going to end up with Josh Downs in a lot of drafts because he's kind of the forgotten guy in this mix. One, Josh Downs is really good.
Yep.
And now 2, he's going to take a lot of the usage that Michael Pittman got. And I think that there is enough space in this offense for 3 pass catchers to succeed in Warren, Downs, and Pierce. And also the scary thing with Pierce, as we mentioned, like, he is in a lot of collisions by the fact that he is downfield so often. He's in these jump ball situations. And while we hope obviously nothing happens to him, like if he has a concussion next year, it could be a long-term absence, as we saw with Treverius Ward on the Colts, dealing with his own issues. So Josh Downs, I think there is a material. He's going to be the 3rd pass catcher drafted on the Colts, clearly. And I think there is a material chance that, he can be their number 1 guy.
Yeah, they will be a very interesting offense for us to talk through in August, of the distribution of everybody. And of course, the health of the quarterback, which is kind of the engine or sets the floor of what all those guys can do. Speaking of, it's always good when we get some fantasy relevant quarterback news in free agency. We mentioned this at the top. Malik Willis, Matthew, ends up going to...
Before we move to Malik Willis real quickly, I want to touch briefly on Michael Pittman,
of course, yeah.
Because I think he goes to Pittsburgh here, and it's weird because I like Alec Pierce more than Michael Pittman. Clearly the Colts like Alec Pierce more than Michael Pittman, but I think there's a pretty good chance that Michael Pittman has the better fantasy year next year than Alec Pierce. I think the Steelers are going to be more pass heavy under Mike McCarthy than they were under Arthur Smith calling the plays. I think, he's got less target competition. It's just him or DK Metcalf. And DK Metcalf has never been a guy that was a massive volume earner, right? DK Metcalf's game had been about touchdowns and about, kind of the big plays. But Michael Pittman is somebody that's had at least 80 receptions for the last 5 years. He's never been a big touchdown threat, although last year Pittman gets 7 touchdowns. And so, even if the touchdowns regress and he's like, whatever, he's 4 or 5 or something like that, I just think he's going to be a solid, wide receiver 3, bordering on low end wide receiver 2 in PPR. I think he's in the, 24 to 30 range, as a wide receiver. I just, it's him and DK Metcalf, right? And we'll talk about the running backs in a second here, but I think, it's him and DK Metcalf and whatever, Freiermuth. But I think Pittman's going to get a big target share on what should be a much more pass-happy offense than we saw last year under Arthur Smith. Mike McCarthy has generally been he certainly was very pass-happy with the Cowboys, and with the Packers, he was a little bit more balanced. But and it obviously depends on whether Aaron Rodgers comes back or not.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be, like a mid-tier wide receiver 3 that could border, like in the right situation, could wind up, wide receiver 22-ish, again, low end, wide receiver 24, low end, wide receiver 2. So he's in that range.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotoWorld.com. And I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched. Or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.